Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kayla Megwa from Channels Television, and I'm moderating this particular panel that's talking about independent media and democratic resilience. It's a very important conversation to have in the times that we're in. I noticed that a lot of the people around here are from all over this continent. We are at a pivotal time as journalists where we have to assert our independence as the media, knowing that the forces around us will do everything to stifle our voices. So that's the conversation we're about to have. And joining me for this conversation, we'll start with the Executive Director of International Press Center, IPC, Lanre Arogundade. Thank you very much. He's making his way here. Please keep those hands together for him as he makes his way here. Also joining us on this panel is Yemi Ademulekun, who is the Executive Director of EIE. Is she joining us online? All right. And then, of course, we have Sadibu Marong, who's the Director, West African Bureau, Reporters Without Borders. Reporters Sans Frontiers. Thank you very much. And from Nigeria here, Comrade Al-Hassan Yahaya, who's the National President of the Nigerian Union of Journalists. This is technically my boss. Thank you all for being here with us. Can I confirm that Yemi Adamulekun is with us online? All right, well, I'll be waiting for that confirmation. Let's begin our conversation. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us on the program.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much. Now, we're aware, Madame, that you're supposed to be at another event in about an hour, so please, we'll have to crave her indulgence. We'll start off with asking her questions in case she has to leave us really soon. So our topic today, independent media and democratic resilience. I'm going to start off with Madame, actually. So the media and civil society organizations have been working hand in hand over the years, displacing undemocratic governments, putting the voice of dissent out there, making sure that opposition has a place in the conversations around democracy, especially in countries like Nigeria. I'm going to ask you, Madame Ademulekun, do you find that resilience is the same today, or has it waned? Have we maybe dropped the ball at some point?
Let's see if this works. All right, it kind of sort of works. Lighting issues, but maybe I'll turn that off. Yeah, I think it has. Sorry, Madame, Yemi is fine. Madame ages me significantly and very and very unnecessarily. So. I think it does. I mean, under military rule, there was a common enemy. I think there was some consensus, for the most part, that we did not want to be under military rule. So the ability of civil society and media to work hand in hand was easier, so to speak. And as we've entered partisan politics and we've shifted from politics of any ideology that makes any sense, and as our politicians cross carpet, and civil society supposedly aligning with progressives. So you align with a progressive that's in APC one day, the next day the person is in PDP. And then you're wondering, then what, so to speak, in a sense. But I think fundamentally the point really is that because we've allowed the nature of our politics to influence the nature of our engagement, it has influenced how civil society engages. And for media, we've also seen the very intentional nature of how politicians have acquired media assets, which is why platforms like Premium Times that the CGIB founder pioneered, that was part of the idea. Independent media that wouldn't need print, that wouldn't need distribution, because carrying all your copies of newspapers was an easy way to stop it from circulation. And I guess just in my view, that's part of the challenge we have. So politicians owning media outlets and the disparate alignment of civil society players in the political space has made it very difficult, has made it more difficult, so to speak.
That's a very important point Yemi has made there. Mr. Lanre, I'm going to come to you. Same question, and just to build on what it is that Yemi has said. we do have a situation, I don't know about the rest of Africa, but in Nigeria, we do have a situation where, media houses are owned by politicians. And it creates an interesting dynamic with our reportorial. Even in editorial meetings, in many offices, I can imagine that you're not allowed to air some particular views because that would override the interest. Who's the biggest payer in this particular media organization? Can we go after him if he does something wrong? What can be done about that?
Okay, let me start by saying that politicians have always owned the media in Nigeria. And what we need to look at, if we're comparing the past with now, is what kind of politicians owned the media then. So if you go back a bit in history to the pre-independence struggles or the independence struggles, I mean, you had a newspaper like Nigerian Tribune that was owned by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. And you also had state newspapers. You had the West African Pilot. What you could not deny of those newspapers was the fact that they were ideological driven. So you knew that Tribune would always stand for issues around free education, free healthcare, and the rest of them. What I see now is that when you look at our political ownership of the media, it's less ideological, it's more nebulous, it's about hero worshipping of the individual. You have godfatherism in politics, there's also godfatherism in the media. And I think it affects the way the media kind of defines its resilience. Yeah. So in a sense, you had newspapers that were owned by government. We had Daily Sketch in Western region, for example, or later on Oyo State. I've given the example of the Tribune, but it didn't stop the media then from being quite resilient. And some of us were inspired to become journalists, partly because of the kind of robust engagement you had from columnists who worked from those newspapers. But that is not to say that political ownership today does not have an effect. And I think it speaks to the larger question of what we call the political economy of the media in Nigeria, in the sense that you have much more intolerance of questions of accountability in the media, and partly because it's also linked to media survival. The fact that for the media to survive today,
you need money.
They need patronage, of government. Some of the proprietors are possibly contractors here and there, so they are a bit jittery when it comes to journalists raising fundamental questions about accountability in governance. This is even now compounded by the problem of underpayment or non-payment of salaries and so on. So you have journalists whose welfare are compromised. You have proprietors who are struggling to survive. They are leaning on government. They are leaning on those that we are supposed to hold accountable. And I think the combination of that has a lot of effect on the ability of the Nigerian media to be resilient and to actually demand for democratic accountability from those who lead us.
Comrade Yahaya, as the president, the national president of the Nigerian Union of Journalists, would you say we have an independent media in Nigeria? One that can stand all the influences and all the voices that try to stifle truth?
Well, first of all, let me begin by saying that an independent media is a media that we are hoping and expecting to represent, protect, as well as project the good image of our dear country, with the sole aim of holding people accountable for their actions. But today, what we have, I can say, is a proliferation of media organizations owned by politicians who have no interest and passion for this profession. It is clearly stated by my brother here, and based on the report revealed by Reporters Without Borders, it shows the ownership of media today in this country are mostly politicians, and politicians who have no passion and love for this profession. But before then, let us look at the critical issues involving our profession. If you look at the economic instability in the media industry, it's worrisome. The advice is dwindling day by day by the giant organizations, tech. And at the same time, if you look at these issues, it's issues of concern. coming back to this country, if we want to definitely promote this profession, we must look at these critical issues, area of remuneration for Nigerian journalists. This is one key aspect that we need to focus more, invest hugely, and work towards changing the narrative. Like my brother said here, most of the media organizations today, they can't afford to pay salary because they were not able to get advert as when due. But above all, let's look at this issue critically. Issues of remuneration is an issue of concern. If you can recall, in the 7th Assembly or 8th Assembly, there was a bill that was sponsored at, we call it Media Enhancement Bill. That bill has reached second reading, but it was killed. We all know who killed that bill. But I think it is high time for us as journalists to stand firm so that we can be able to fight for ourselves. Just not long ago, President of this country, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, increased salary of judicial workers by 300%. We are all celebrating them as journalists, but we cannot celebrate our own. I think it is high time to come up with what I call attitudinal change in this profession. By the time we change your attitude, then we can be able to stand firm and protect and project the profession so that at the end of the day, we'll have a profession whereby we'll have a very good remuneration. Research has also shown in Nigeria, less than 1% of journalists have any form of insurance, talk less of life insurance or health insurance. Yes, you may say that we have journalists who are working under federal government agency and it is mandatory for them to have what we call NHI. It's true, it's there. But how many of them are working in that institutions? I think it is high time for us to come up with new blueprint, a blueprint that will take this profession to a greater height. That is why in the last 1 year, we embarked on advocacy, sensitizing, informing, and enlightening people importance of coming up with what we call new remuneration for Nigerian journalists, 1. 2, issues of insurance is also of concern. We are advocating and sensitizing people to know the importance of health insurance as well as life insurance. Before now, we have life insurance policy for Nigerian journalists. I think during former President Mohamed Garba, if I can recall, the premium is only 7,000 naira. Yes. At the cost of death, a family can benefit from 1.5 million naira. I remember I was chairman of NUJ in my state, Gombe State. I promised journalists, if elected as chairman, I will pay insurance premium for all practicing journalists in that state. And I was elected, and I have to fulfill that fact. I paid for all practicing journalists. Down the line, one of us who is a very young journalist died. 2 months after his death, we were able to present a check of 1.5 million naira to his family. Today, as I'm talking to you, the family of that guy, they are living in a house courtesy of NUJ. We bought a house of 1.2 million naira at that particular time. Today, this house is worth more than 20 million naira in Gombe State. This is the importance of insurance. I think it is important for us as journalists to come off and adopt that policy. Above all, we also need to look at issues of economic and psychological situation of our profession. Like always Professor Fati says, he used economic and psychological safety for journalists. How economic are we? How much are we paid as journalists as our take-home in a month? Indeed. I think this is the time for all of us to come together so that we can come up with what we call Media Enhancement Bill. Already we have identified leaders at the National Assembly who are willing to sponsor that bill. It's late for us to come up this time around, talk together as stakeholders so that the bill will be presented before the National Assembly for ratification, and we believe if it is adopted, it's going to change the way we operate in this country as journalists.
That's a fantastic, good, that was really good work you did there. Now that you're national president, I'm hoping that we can, if we can spread that love on a national scale, but we'll get to that shortly. Yemi has to go, but let's get Yemi's thoughts. You opened up this door, Yemi, because we actually were trying to get a nexus between how journalism fared in the past and then how it is working now, especially in our collaborations with civil society organizations. So to close that conversation with you, Yemi, so that you can also go off for your other meeting, what can we do? You know, what can be done between the media and civil society organizations to become as vibrant as they used to be back in the day? Or is it unnecessary? One would think that, you know, with the situation in our country right now, there would actually be more need for that collaboration and a stronger union that actually gets the truth out there. I don't know if she's still there. Is she still? Oh, we lost the connection to her. Hopefully we get her back. But I'm going to ask you, Lanre, same question. That nexus between how we were as journalists, when we had a common enemy, at least that's the way I saw what Yemi was trying to say. We had a common enemy, we wanted the military out, so it was easy for us to work together. Have we been able to identify a common enemy right now that we can work together to eliminate?
Well, because we had a common enemy in the military, it also meant that the attack on the media during that period was centralized. And now with democracy, we have decentralized attacks. And I'm sure that if we look at various compilations of attacks on journalists by CJID, International Press Center, Media Rights Agenda, and others, you're going to discover that the state governors have become very, very prominent. Political party agents have been enabled. And in academic discourse now, we're talking about shadow gatekeepers of press freedom.
Yeah.
Those who stay behind and make use of the security forces to attack journalists. Mm-hmm. So you have a situation whereby a reporter does an investigative story in Sokoto State on poor conditions of producing water, bottled water, and the DSS goes after that person simply because the proprietor has actually reported. So the military more or less stood alone, but now you have the government working with these shadow gatekeepers, business interests, and the rest of them all attacking journalists. And that means that we need greater resilience. One thing that was important in the past that I think we should not miss in this conversation is that the resilience of the media was also influenced by the resilience not just of civil rights organizations, but individuals.
The people.
Yes, the people. So you had a personality like, Fela Nicola Kuti, who stood against injustice and whose reporting also made, the media. Many may not know here that Punch newspaper became celebrated when it reported the attack on Fela's residence. You also had, Igani Fawemi. So when we are talking about what we can do, I think we need, individuals like that who, whenever they hear that something has happened to the journalist, even without asking questions, they are already in court, they are ready to defend the media and so on. But to do that, I think we need to win back a lot of public trust, which I do not think we have now.
All right,
but I need to stress at this point that, just like the LUJ president was saying, a dependent media cannot be expected to be independent. And so what this sector needs, we do not just need this civil society collaboration and so on, but we need to look at the media critically itself in terms of how to sustain ourselves. Diversified revenue sources, stronger business models. I know that the CEO of CJID, Lakpolorun Yomi, always makes this point that yes, we have these attacks, we have these arrests, but perhaps the greatest threat to the media in Nigeria today is the political economy of the media. The fact that the media is really disappearing. And so we need to be more creative, even in terms of, do we have more collaborations in terms of media?
Recording
so
in
that
progress.
we can be in a position to stand against all these kind of problems that we do have currently.
Let me come to Reporters Sans Frontiers, because they would have to deal with a situation where we have a rise in authoritarianism in our region. And of course, we have a decline in democratic governments and a decline in democratic sentiments, where it's so strange to see Africans who had to deal with their rights. For the most part of the 80s and the 90s, we had no rights in this part of the world. And then democracy came, and then we're seeing a change in that. And many of them are blaming that on the bad governance by democratic elected people, and now they're favoring military rule. This rise in authoritarianism, we've seen it before. We know what the side effect is. Your media doesn't exist. You would have to sneak to do that. Talk to us about the experience with Reporters Sans Frontiers, especially in parts of Africa, in parts of West Africa, that are lacking in democratic principles right now.
Thank you very much. I think the key word here is decline.
effectively there is a decline, because if we take into consideration the World Press Freedom Index of Reporters Without Borders, which we issue every year, we will realize in terms of analysis that in the last 2 to 3 years, one of the indicators which really had a decline is the political indicators, and then the economic indicators. The political indicators, there has been a fall of around minus 7.6.
Minus 7?
Minus 7.6 in terms of points. That means what? That means, in reality, there is a failure. There is a big failure worldwide, including in Africa, in Nigeria, in West Africa, and worldwide also. That means, if we take into consideration the constitutions of our countries, the provisions where, for example, said, okay, press freedom is here, we have to guarantee press freedom, freedom of expression, and so on and so. In fact, the reality has shown that those who are very ones supposed to protect press freedom are those who are jeopardizing press freedom, and those are the politicians and political authorities. This is what we have realized in the last years, including this year. And this, in terms of examples, there are some momentums where it happens many of the times, like during election times. For example, in the last 2 to 3 years in Africa, we have had some elections in many countries, and we effectively analyzed and monitored that how politicians also, they have jeopardized before, during, and after elections the media landscape at large. And the second term is during coups in Africa. Actually, in the Central Sahel in West Africa, we have nearly 4 countries ruled by juntas: Mali, Burkina, Niger, and Guinea.
Yes.
And those countries also have really experienced a very, very sharp decline because of the attitude on how the juntas, the military officers, they have been behaving in front of the media itself in a situation to control the narrative of the media. That's why we have seen media in exile. Many journalists from Burkina Faso now went out of the country. We have seen arbitrary arrests, the rise of arbitrary arrests, and we also have seen journalists themselves who, in a very normal world, should have been in newsrooms, but unfortunately they have been forcibly sent into the army, conscripted into the army in a country like Burkina Faso. Some of them now have been freed, but they came back with a lot of illness. That is also something we need to be aware of. We also have seen how regulatory bodies also have been instrumented in those countries. For example, as we are in Burkina Faso, let's stick there. Yeah. We will see how the body which regulate the media industry has been infiltrated by the president himself, who from now on has the only capacity to appoint the president of the regulatory body. This is extraordinarily difficult. We also have seen how, in terms of industry, the actions of the juntas and those authoritarian regimes, they have also jeopardized the economy of the media. In Guinea, for example, up to last year, we have, at the half of last year, we have witnessed and documented nearly 700 to 800 job cuts, for example, because the regime and the authorities, military authorities, they were not able to scoop with the main media there.
Yeah, but Sadibu, to be fair, when we have a military junta in government, it's expected, isn't it? It's almost, it comes with the territory that the economy of journalists will be dropped. In fact, media houses will be shut down because you're not going to be able to have an independent media when you have a military government in power.
It depends. It has been for so long time. It has been it has been possible to do journalism and independent journalism in military regimes. But what we have experienced in those 4 countries is something which is quite something, going outside of the ordinary situation. I mean, this is why this is quite dramatic and this is quite difficult. We have seen in other countries how from the military regimes, people and journalists themselves, they have been able to at least exercise freely their work as a journalist to go to report without reprisal. And this is the key thing. But in those countries, now there is a kind of tabula rasa. And if we monitor, because we're monitoring a lot of countries in Africa, some of which also came from, has undertaken some military situation. But what we are seeing in the central part of West Africa is something extraordinary, and this is something that is why
I think that's a very important point to make. We do have to see if we can wrap up. You said this is tabula rasa.
It is a tabula rasa.
There's no template for it. We're rolling with the punches, so to speak, in those parts of Africa.
We think and we believe it is a tabula rasa, and then also we need to stand up for that. We need to stand up for journalism and for independent journalism.
I'm going to come to you, comrade, as we try to wrap up. How do you think that the NUJ as a body can partner, especially in places where we still have democracy, like in Nigeria? How do we partner with the government at various levels to strengthen the media and the safety of journalists in places like Nigeria?
Yeah, partnership is key and critical for us as journalists, and NUJ is willing to always open its door for partnership with civil society. Let me give you a feedback. I was telling Dapo this morning, my brother, that after the release of our index report, we saw a drastic change in some states. In fact, one of the governors was asking me, how comes my immediate neighbor beats me in that report? Nigerian governors hate this comparison. I think the methodology adopted by the CGIG is very, very key and important. The comparison is one thing that may likely change the narratives. From the way we saw things are going currently, likely in the next year's report, we will see a drastic change in that regard. I know about 2 or 3 states that are not doing well in this report that was released, but based on the outcome of that report, they were trying to see how they can be able to adjust, improve the areas that they were not doing well in that regard. I know a state that also is coming up with a strategy. Before now is the state that passed a law to improve welfare of working journalists as well as increase years of service for practicing journalists. We felt we'll use that method. By the time the law was assented by the governor, you can take that law, bring it before the NEC. NEC should ratify the law so that we can distribute across the 36 states of the Federation. But at the end of the day, the governor come up with another strategy. We believe that strategy he come up with is far better than that strategy that he's adopting. Because if somebody that has already retired at 60 years, you are giving him additional 10 years, I think there is what we call diminishing return will manifest in that regard. So the governor now is coming up with innovation of recruiting younger journalists who are going to fill the vacant of those that are exiting from the service. And lastly, these issues of collaboration is critical. For us in NUJ, as I'm talking to you, we are already collaborating with government agencies, especially NHIA, I earlier talked about, on the issues of insurance for journalists. By next year, we'll have a package for practicing journalists who are not working under federal government agencies. Those that are working under private media organizations, those that are working on their own, can be able to assess.
I think he deserves a round of applause for that.
To assess quality healthcare from primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, up to the tertiary healthcare with 3 key objectives. 1 is to reduce what we call out-of-pocket expenses. 2, to increase what we call universal health coverage. Nigeria is a signatory to that. And the 3rd one is to see how we can reduce maternal mortality among our women. Nigeria is one country that is bringing high burden of maternal mortality every day, every year. The figure is alarming. The other insurance is life insurance. We hope and pray that is inevitable. If a journalist died, at least his family will benefit from insurance premium that he has paid for himself. So I think it is important for us as journalists to adopt that strategy. Issues of remuneration is also of concern, like I told you earlier on.
Yes.
Next year, we are coming up with a bill called Media Enhancement Bill. We hope and pray everyone will give us all the... This bill is not for NUJ. All sister organizations are going to be involved. NGO and CSOs working in line with our thematic area will also be integrated so that they can make their own input towards actualizing that dream.
That's fantastic. Put your hands together for the president. I hear Yemi is back on, and we have to wrap up with her. Yemi, if you can hear us. Yes, we were talking about the collaborations. Yes, we were talking about the collaboration between the media and CSOs and how that can be strengthened in today's media landscape and with the situations we have in countries in West Africa.
Thank you. I think a big one deeply is for media to understand that CSOs are partners. Yes, quite a few of us get funding and we do have some resources, but the fact that there's an expectation for us to pay commercial rates for media exposure amplification is just, quite frankly, it's quite ridiculous in my view. I am not MTN. I am not Access Bank. So you can't charge me the same thing you would charge MTN or Access Bank for a full-page ad or for a radio mention or for something on TV. You would see us as a commercial entity because we're thinking that we have a grant to give or monies to pay. And I think that's a really huge thing, just even how we see the space, how we see each other as partners in this enterprise. I mean, I like what Mr. Rugundade said about media has always been a history of politicians owning media. But I also like then how the chairman of the NUJ framed it in saying that they don't... Sorry? Okay. How the chairman framed it in saying that it's not... they don't care about the platform. They don't care about the business of media or communicating. Yeah. It's just an avenue for them to be... to have a stake in influencing perceptions. And then secondly, I think understanding that regardless of what partisan interests, even from the CSO side or from the media side, is that if we make Nigeria and preserving our democracy, flawed as it might be, if that is the focus, and ensuring that Nigerians get it, are better off in the way that we engage with each other and what we're trying to do and communicate, then it's for the greater good. And we can do better work and work together better in that regard. And lastly, I would also say that for those who are not, maybe your premium times or your online media like cable, is that traditional platforms of media should see the value in public service announcements. Not everything should have a cost. Yes, I get it. It takes money to do satellite, it takes money to print, but there's a mindset in terms of engaging civil society that allows us to partner. So when civil society organizations do have resources from grants and somewhere else, we are able to support media in that way because we have it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yemi. Yes, Larry.
Okay, well, my concluding thoughts is that we need to build collective resilience, because when you have collective resistance, it's much harder to break. But for the media to realize that the greatest or the best currency that we could have is the public trust, I think that is very important, because if the public sees the media as fighting for their interests, they would always, defend the media.
Yes.
And so investments in responsible journalism through, fact-checking, discipline of verification is very important.
Okay.
And if we're thinking of building a social contract with the public to have this kind of trust that we so, desire, I think it's important for us to begin to listen to communities. Journalism is actually a public trust.
Yes.
And we need to report more, about the people. I read something that was quite instructive by Dari Babarisa on Facebook. I think maybe this morning or yesterday, about a doctor who, after leaving the medical school and starting practice, relocated to his hometown in Esauke, in Osun State.
Yes.
Not because I'm from that area. And for the past 50 years, he had been practicing in the community, and his hospital is more or less like the general hospital in that kind of community. I mean, these are stories that we need to tell, because they then connect, the media, because we complain, the newspapers, people are not buying us, it's because of internet and so on. I also think that it's also partly due to the fact that our content is more government focused,
not people
and
focused.
less people,
All right,
focused.
because we
and
have
I do
just
not
one
think,
more minute.
This does not happen to us, but
we have just one more minute.
Yeah, so 1 more minute.
I have to get the final thoughts of Mr.
Yeah.
Sadibu.
Although I thought I should make this, because the AUJ president, commendably, has taught a lot about insurance policy and so on. But we also need stronger laws that protect press freedom. Because the fact that you have welfare does not mean that they will not attack you.
Exactly.
So CGID, we've been talking about, a national mechanism on the protection of journalists and press freedom.
Okay.
So we need those laws. They are very, very important
Mr. Sadibu,
to protect
your
us.
final thoughts in 1 minute.
In 1 minute, just to say that most of the time, CSOs and press freedom advocates, I mean, our role, most of the time, people, they see the naming and shaming part, but beyond, there is the solution parts. And most of the time, there are a lot of solutions on the tables. For example, the CGID model we have seen this morning is something really, really we command, and this is something which is really, really working at the local level, which needs to be pushed far and wide, everywhere in Africa, with all the international other NGOs for that. I think also solidarity is important for journalism. Journalists from Nigeria and journalists from Guinea, Niger, and everywhere in the world, they all are journalists, and they need to get together in a very, very, very solidarity way, because this work, this job, needs to still exist despite the challenge we are facing.
Put your hands together for my panel, please. It's a very important, there's never enough time to have this conversation, but it's a conversation that is ongoing. Thank you all very much for being with us.